Hey, welcome to today's episode of the Alaska Homestead Expo Extras. These short chats are a sneak peek into what you will see and learn about in the 2024 Alaska Homestead Expo. This year's expo, the first of this now annual event, is going to be incredible. We'll have workshops on topics involving livestock care, raising and processing, living off-grid, growing a garden and an orchard in Alaska, communicating via ham radio, baking and cooking with whole foods including sourdough and fresh milled grains, foraging, and so much more. And that's just for the adults. Kids are free and they have their own things to do like crafts and orienteering, which is navigating without electronics. What kid doesn't need that skill? Baking, making knots, and that's just a sample of what they'll learn. Plus, Saturday evening is going to be incredible with our Alaska speaker panel. Jody Anderson is going to talk about her trip to the Polar Ag Conference and the things she learned that are working in other polar climates, including things that we can do right here in Alaska. Josh Smith is going to share about all of the cutting-edge propagation he's doing with things like hazelnuts. You've got it, growing right here in our state, and so many more things that he'll be talking about. And dear Barb Thomas is going to share about homesteading in Alaska during the colony days. Her family homesteaded what is now the Muskox farm. Plus, we will be serving free ice cream from Big Dipper, so you just don't want to miss this. If you don't already have your expo tickets, you can get them on our website, commongroundalaska.com. But for now, enjoy hearing what today's speaker has to say. And remember, this is just a sneak peek, so grab your expo tickets soon. Hey, it's Tandy with Common Ground Alaska. I'm super excited that you've joined us for this call. Today, I get to talk with Luetta Robinson, and let me just tell you, she has got to be one of the most encouraging and inspiring people I guess we have met. I was going to say I've ever met, and then I thought, wait, we didn't, but we did. We met at the beach pickup. What an incredible story Luetta has. She has so much to share. I'm excited for this little sneak peek that we're going to get tonight, and I'm really excited for her talk at the expo when she's going to go a lot more in depth about things like homesteading, maybe when your situation isn't optimal, maybe when you have some disability issues, some chronic pain, or maybe when you're a little bit older than the traditional homesteader that's just getting started. Luetta, thank you so much for agreeing to hang out with us tonight. And yeah, I want to hear everything you have to say.
Let me introduce myself for people that don't know me. I'm Luetta. I've lived in Alaska 30 years. I raised my children here, and we have a homestead. It's 5 acres, but I didn't start as a homestead. It was just a place to have. We had a little garden. It wasn't until the children were out of the house and I started having some real issues with my health and realized how important it was that I eat better. And because I live an hour away from Wasilla, 2 hours from Anchorage, it's not always easy to get fresh produce and things and organic. And the more I read and the more I learned, the more critical it got to be. And at one point, I had serious issues with my hip, which is slowly healing. But because I chose not to take a surgical route, it's going to take a few years to heal. I learned all the things I didn't know and all the ways I had things set up that weren't going to work anymore, with not being able to lift things from the ground, not being able to stand for long periods of time. I've improved a lot over the last few years, but those first years were really hard because of all the things I couldn't do. And so that led me on a path to go look up, what do you do when you can't do this and that? And I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find information. Okay, you're in a wheelchair, you want a homestead. What does that look like? Or you are deaf and you want a homestead. You're blind. You'd like to homestead. What does that look like? Having physical impairments, me with my hip, somebody with their arm, things like that. What would you do? And so I found that I couldn't find anything. I couldn't even find listings for tools. And so I started making, I guess you could say, my own plan and program, and it's Homesteading Elders. And tonight, I'm going to put this in 3 segments. And the first one's just general things. If you're considering a homestead and you're thinking, wow, how could I do that? It really is possible. You really can do it. You just have to know what your particular challenges are. And everybody's different. Everybody has different combinations or main challenge. So that's why one size doesn't fit all. I can't just say to you, okay, guys, you're going to do it this way. So what I'm going to do here is give you some general things to think about. And this is just overall. You want an accessible layout. When you look at property, if you have problems walking, standing, oh, you're in a wheelchair or a walker, you want to look at how flat is it? And if it's not flat, how big are the hills and the valleys? If they're just rolling and subtle, that's not too bad. That's still totally doable. You have to think about designing your pathways. When you look at that property, hopefully you get a chance to see the property for a year before you put anything permanent, but I know that's not realistic for most people. What I suggest is if you go online, no matter where you live, your area has information on the sun, the wind, the weather for the last 2, 3 years. You can get a lot of information about that piece of property without having to live there for a year. You can look up what disasters have happened in your area. So what things are important for you? Earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, volcanoes. What's the thing closest to you? Do you have major droughts? Do you have major flooding and you just didn't know it? The other thing is when you're looking at property, you need to talk to the locals, and people usually love to talk about their area. What have they experienced recently? Fires? How long has it been since that area had a fire? How often do they have major fires? Those are all really important. Where's the water on your property? Because to have a spring is great, but you have to be able to control that water flow somehow. Do you have a swamp? Is part of it someplace marshy where you can't put a structure? You have to walk the whole property. You've got to go around the whole thing and look at every inch of it. Because if you are, I know it sounds crazy, but if you're standing here and you're walking in a line, you can't see really well what's 25 feet over that way. So you have to really go back and forth in a pattern so that you get to see all the property. It's important to look at, okay, in my case, I don't want to carry anything uphill. That's really hard for me. So when I look at property, I think of what things do I want higher? What things do I want lower? I didn't want my house at the lowest point. Why? Because as snow melts, things like that, you're going to get some natural flooding. Also, if I'm at the higher point and I put in a driveway and a path, I'm going to already have a route to take a four-wheeler or a car or a truck or machinery uphill to where I need it. I don't, and a barn where it's higher. Water up higher, because you can always use gravity to have the water come down. And that can save you a lot of steps if your water is coming down to you from a pond or water collection. So those are things you have to think about is what do you plan to do on this property? That's going to make a big difference. Are you going to just have some chickens and a garden? That's pretty easy because you want those right outside your front door. And you'll have a lot of forest for your edges to keep you separated and for the wildlife. Are you looking at a pasture? That's going to change things because you need rotational grazing. And if you're not familiar with these terms, you need to look them up. Rotational grazing is a way to manage your pastures so that you have just the right amount of animals to move them every day, every couple of days, probably no more than every 3 days, unless you have really large pastures, because you're going to keep improving those pastures as you let goats or cows or sheep walk on those pastures and eat. You don't want them to eat the grass down to the bottom in every little piece. You want them to eat it just a little bit and then move them on and move them on. And all that manure that they put down is going to improve that pasture. And if you let poultry come behind them about 3 days behind, it's perfect because they're going to eat the slugs and the flies and pests that may be in that manure and clean it up, and they'll add their manure, and pretty soon you'll see your pasture start to change. If you're thinking about bigger animals, you have to think about, where do you want that pasture? How easy will it be to make fencing? How easy will it be to make fencing where you can change up squares? So you're not moving everything, you're just opening and closing places. And the water might be central so that they can keep using the same water even though you're changing around your fencing configuration. So these things are important. And single level homes, single level barns, unless you want to be able to use some type of a lift system to put things up, but then you have to be able to get to that floor. Then you need a lift system for you if you're not able to climb ladders and things like that. A type of elevator system if you want to have storage in a barn that's up above, or even in a home. If you want a home with a loft or stairs, and stairs aren't easy for you, then you're going to have to look at a lift system. Um, I'm assuming I'm saying this as if you're a single person, which I am, so things are directed around me. But if there's a couple or a family, then it would be the combination of everyone in that family group. Adaptive equipment, grab bars, handrails, they're amazing, especially where we live in the snow. Having railings is unbelievable. And I'll tell you something I had no idea about. I was looking up old farms on the East Coast where they have lots of snow, and they used to have record snow. They had covered pathways, but the pathways weren't only covered, they also had about a 3-foot pony wall on each side. So they didn't get snow and rain. And if you needed to, you could always put something up for that next part to keep things out, which is a great idea if you have mobility issues, to make covered pathways between your buildings, because then it doesn't matter what the weather is outside. Bathrooms. When we laugh here, because we have outhouses, you think about an outhouse, how to make that accessible for you. Sheds, accessing sheds with equipment and tools. Low maintenance landscaping. You want things that where your gardens aren't and things like that. What kind of pathways do you want? Pea gravel, or maybe a little bit bigger. You can walk on that even barefoot. That's wheelchair accessible. That's pretty good pathway. If you live where there's snow, then again, do you have a way, a four-wheeler with a plow or a skid steer? Do you have access to that kind of equipment? Or are your paths wide enough that you can take a truck down with a plow on it? So those are things you want to think about when you're looking at your overall picture of where you're going to put things. You need to, the thing that we usually forget is, where are you going to store snow? 2 years ago in our winter, we got so much snow that when I shoveled, I had to throw it over my head to get it. So what do you do in a winter like that? Where do you store snow? That has to be part of your plan, is where to put snow, where you want your runoff to go. So you can look at the natural contours of the land and go, okay, water's going to naturally go that way. I need to prepare for that, or I want to use that. Technology, voice activated, things that you can use from your phone or that have remote controls. I have one light in my room that if I'm really tired and I can't get up and I'm sore, I can get on my phone and I can turn the lamp to a different color, or I can turn it completely up, or I can turn it completely off. And sometimes that's nice. Little things like that are a big deal. Security systems, comfortable places to rest. We don't think about that when we're outside and we're doing chores and we're getting things done. Sometimes benches along the way, and it can just be a log. It could be a log bench that you make, just some place you can sit for a minute and rest, so that you're not walking all the way back or all the way to the barn in one time, in one journey. You can break it up. That's important. Good
Luita, I think
lighting.
that part of what you're saying is so instrumental to, it's just not things that I've necessarily thought of before. And when a lot of times I know for a lot of us when we head into something, we get a little we put on our rose colored glasses, right? I can do this, I can do this. And so thinking about things like not having to carry something uphill, so having maybe your barn lower than your house so that when you're carrying, assuming you're carrying water, you're carrying the water down and you're carrying an empty bucket up. That just seems so helpful. And just I just am really grateful for all. It's just so far. I know you've got a lot more to share, but I just want to say thank you for coming up with these things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of, like a bench along the way. And we have a U-pick farm. And so, as you're talking to me about these things, I'm thinking we have elderly people who come out. What can I do
Yes.
for people who it's so fun to have them? And I want them to feel welcome because they come with beautiful, rich stories and so much enthusiasm and all this wisdom. And I want them there. But I never really thought about putting maybe a bench partway out because it's a ways out to the where the honeyberries and the strawberry or honeyberries and the raspberries and stuff are. It's a ways.
Oh, okay.
So if we had a couple of benches along the way where people could rest, that just that I'd never thought about that before. So this is useful for more than one application, I guess I would say.
I'm glad. And this is for not just, I realize that my target audience, if you will, is people with physical challenges and that are over 50. But even if you have children or members of your family, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, that have particular challenges, there's so much to think about, even for children with challenges, to make it so it's enjoyable for them so that they can have fun and participate too. Good lighting is a big one. And I'm a headlamp person, but I know that a lot of people have motion lights, which I do. I don't on the geese because they move around all the time, but I do on the chickens because they go in at night and they're not moving again. So if there's something out by them, it's not them. The turkeys and the chickens, once they're in, the ducks, it depends on the time of year, but the geese, they are out all the time. Winter, summer, it doesn't matter. So I don't have one directly for them, but I do for the other guys and the rabbitry, because if there's something moving, it's not my livestock. And so that's something to think about is lighting. So you can see from the house. You don't always have to go out and see what's going on. If you hear a ruckus, the geese one night, I swore something was in the geese pen and I looked out the window and I flicked on the light that I have for them from inside the house that turns on the light outside. And I could see that they were just actually having a good time in the snow and playing, but it sounded like it was more than that. But I would have had to put on boots and a coat and everything and go out there if I just didn't have that light that I could turn on. So
I
things like that are really helpful.
That's really smart too. And I feel like a light is something that you don't necessarily, when you don't have it, you don't know how much you would miss it until you do. We just got one of those spotlight things that shines for, I don't even know. It probably shines all the way to Anchorage. I don't know. It's not, my son got it for my husband for Christmas. Holy moly, that thing is handy because, like you said, when we hear something out across the field, sometimes we have moose that come through at night and we want to make sure that they've broken through the fence before and they get it. That would be disastrous if they get into the orchard. We don't have to go tromping all the way out there. We're perfectly able-bodied, but I don't want to go out there in the middle of the night and
No,
encounter a moose in my orchard.
no,
I want to know what I'm facing before I head out there.
exactly.
So I think that's some of these things too are just they're common sense, but not necessarily they should be common sense. I guess that's the word, but they're just not always things you think of. So yeah, so keep going. This is fabulous.
I have to tell you, they weren't common sense for me. So I'm going to raise my hand for this one because I started all this stuff in the spring and through the summer, and then we got into winter, and we had a bear in the yard, and I have chain link fence around my birds. And so they were just losing it. The geese were coming unglued, and this is when I had them all together. They're separated now. And I looked out and there was a bear and he was trying to move that fence and he couldn't. And mostly because of the snow. had really sank it in so that it was stuck. And so I was able to holler at the bear and shine a light on him. And of course, he left. And since then, I've gotten a livestock guardian dog that I'm training. And so Yukon has been really good because he hears stuff long before you see it. Sometimes I'll think when he was younger, I would say, oh, he's barking at nothing. And then if I gave it a minute, oh no, he was really barking at something, but you couldn't see it. And I couldn't hear it, but he could hear it. Dogs can train dogs. Notice my wording here. Trained dogs are a great asset. And emergency preparedness. That's the other thing is I'm when I get through the day and I get everything done, I always feel like, whoo, but then I forget what happens if this breaks or what happens if you don't have that. And so this winter was a really good example. We went to -40. I was out of fuel because I didn't realize how fast I was using fuel compared to the whole beginning of the winter. And okay, no big deal. I'm going to take my propane and I have an extra heater and I attached it. The propane tank was leaking. Where you connected the heater to it, it leaked. And so that's why I tell people 1 is none, 2 might do, 3 is key, 4 is more, and 5 to thrive. You should have 5 of everything. And people laugh, but I'm here to tell you this winter was proof to me that was true because I ended up borrowing a propane tank. A friend brought one for me and my heater was good and my connection was good. There was something wrong with the tank. So you always want to have 5, 6 ways to do everything.
I think that's really good to think of too. And when you first started saying it, the brain automatically goes to, that's extreme. Okay, hold on, because you just gave your own story. You said
Yes,
you ran out of fuel because you had no idea how quickly you were using it because it was so very cold. And then there was
suddenly.
some, you had a backup, but there was an issue with your backup. And
Mhm.
I completely understand that our neighbors are off grid and they have 3 generators, 3,
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
3 all 3 went down within a couple of days of each other. And she's elderly and her husband has some health issues. And Jean was able to go fix one of them. And then I don't remember how the whole story played out, but I just remember thinking anyone that has 3 of something would think, oh, I'm completely covered. But she absolutely was not covered. So it's interesting to think alternate sources of heat. We have wood heat, we have a Toyo. And now you've got me thinking, what else do we need? But I have to tell you a funny story about livestock guardians. We used to have a Marima, which is similar to
Mhm.
a Pyrenees. And that dog was so smart and he was fearless and he kept the moose off the plate. It was like if a moose we would joke and say, oh, a moose is considering stepping a tiptoe on our 10 acres. And boy, Fezzik could be off. Nope, he's all mine. But he would bark all the time. And I remember at first it was like you said, it's, oh, our neighbors are going to hate us. We don't have any super close neighbors, but any that are
Yes.
somewhat close are going to hate us. And then I saw a reel that was put on by someone who owned Marimas and their 2 dogs. It was cute. They were pretending the 2 dogs were talking and the dog says, the dog was talking to its owner, pretending. And he said, I know I saw you looking out the window and I saw that you could hear me barking. And he said, I wasn't sure if it was the ninjas or the zombies, and I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. And that kind of sparked a light in my brain to think, wait a minute, he can't see it, but he senses that something's there. He's not just a big chicken because there's nothing fearful about this dog. He was saying something is lurking and it's not supposed to be here, and this is my job. So I think it took a mindset shift and taking some cookies to our neighbors occasionally.
Yes. I have a Great Pyrenees,
Uh-huh.
and I wouldn't say he's fearful, but he is very cautious. He does not like new things, and he does not like things on his property. And he, one day, because when he barks, I make it a point to say, okay, Yukon, what is it? If he really barks more than once or twice, I go and I see and I go, what is it? What are you barking at? And he'll look, he knows now, he expects it. And I'm looking over there. And I'm like, Yukon, I don't hear or see anything. And then I just stood there for a little while, and within about 30 seconds, I could hear a truck that he heard before I could hear it, and it was coming our direction. And as soon as about the time I could hear it, he started barking again. See, I told you. And I was like, yes, you're right. And so I've learned if he barks, I need to go look. He doesn't bark at just nothing. But one of the things I'd like to talk about is I made a list of specific things that people, I guess what I'll say is specific challenges and things you might want to think about. So mobility challenges, which is mine, wheelchairs, scooters. They have some amazing scooters now, and they're not just made for flat ground or sidewalk or city. They have them for you to go trekking. And so portable ramps. If you have people that can use stairs, but you can't, you can take a ramp and put it on hinges, and everybody can use the stairs. And when it's your turn, you can put the ramp down. So that way it's easier for you. Transfer boards. People think about wheelchairs. What if somebody wants to sit somewhere? What about putting a bench where somebody could get out of their wheelchair and next to a milking stanchion by having seating, a transfer board? And these are things that can be permanent or they can be on hinges to make it so somebody that is challenged with standing or even in a wheelchair can milk. They can move stuff. And then again, I mentioned earlier elevators or lifts to move things. There's a lot of really popular right now for people with garages that have tall garages, and they have all these motorized lifts. You can put all your crates on there and hit the button, or you can pull the rope, depending on what you want to do and your comfort level and your finances. Visual impairments, labeling things in braille, feed, bins, all kinds of things, or even just big tags that can be, or tactile things that are different. So you can, chickens feel one way, duck feed feels another way. Maybe they're not completely blind, but trying to read a label. I have problems reading a label with my glasses. So there's no way in the world somebody's going to be able to read a label if they're visually challenged. It doesn't mean they're blind, but those kinds of things make it so everybody can do chores, do jobs, even if they don't normally do it. That's something else to think about. If you're with somebody with these challenges and you get sick, they're going to have to do some of this. So you need to make it easy for them. Don't just assume, oh, you're never going to have to feed the chickens. You don't know that. If you can't get out of that bed, somebody's going to have to feed the chickens. So setting up things in advance, voice control things, and garden identification. People always say, oh yeah, I know what's in that garden. Does the rest of the family know what's in that garden? So you need to label things. You need to put labels, and depending on the challenges of the people in your family, you need to make those labels. So everybody, braille at the bottom of the label so that I know this row is this, or tactily different. If you have small children, pictures. Pictures are great. They're easy. You can just take some rubber cement, put them on there, cover it with the rubber cement. It can rain, it can pour. It's not going anywhere. Those pictures are going to stay. If you have somebody with hearing impairments, induction loop systems, because that enhances the communication by communicating directly to the hearing aids or a cochlear implant, implant. The other thing are visual alerts. We don't think about these things. And you don't have to be profoundly deaf. One of my running jokes is one of my sons, we had an alarm that sounded like a foghorn that would go off in a fire department for this kid during high school. He could sleep through it. The whole rest of the house would be yelling at him to turn it off. And it's next to his head on a nightstand. And he was asleep. So I have some friends who are even older than I am, and one of them has hearing loss. And the alarm was going off for the dryer. And it was not an alarm like your clothes are dry. It's like something's wrong. He couldn't hear it. It was out of the range of his hearing. So you need to think about visual alerts for the doorbells, for phone calls, for equipment. If water's out and you have a buzzer, that's not going to work depending on what range that buzzer's in. A driveway alarm. It would be really hard for somebody who had hearing impairment. You can't hear a truck or a car come up or know that there's a moose, but if you've got one of those driveway alerts and there's a light that flashes when that happens, maybe you have two or three of them, so it's different colors for different places. If you have an alarm for your smoke alarms, even carbon monoxide alarms or a flood alarm in a basement, you need to have visual cues, lights that go off that can be seen, that you can see in a lighted room, somewhere that's a main spot for people.
I think that I want to interject here because a person does not have to be, you said this, but I want to reiterate it. A person does not have to be profoundly deaf to
Right,
not be able to hear something.
right.
Gene he has a brain injury, so he's up a lot at night and his sleep patterns are really messed up. So he was up in the middle of the night one night and he was making bacon and somehow it got smoky and the smoke alarm went off and he never heard it.
That's right.
Gene isn't deaf. We can have conversations, although he is definitely hard of hearing, but he's not deaf. But
Exactly.
the tone, he could not
Exactly.
hear. So it woke the rest of the house up.
Yes.
But he never, I actually, when I came out, I was like, why aren't you turning that off? I was irritated. Why aren't you turning that off? And he said, what? He was just sitting down crunching bacon. And I was like, the smoke alarm. Holy moly. So that's something to consider too. He's definitely hard of hearing, but not to the degree that I would expect a person to be to not hear a smoke alarm.
It's just what range
Yeah.
that things are in. And so people need to really think about those kinds of things. The other one that I was thinking about, arthritis, joint pain, or like me, impairment with joints, ergonomic tools, padded handles, extended grips, all kinds of things can reduce the strain. You don't realize, even if you're making cookies and you're doing this with the cookie scoop, you'd be surprised if you got a different brand of cookie scoop, your hand wouldn't bother you anymore. It's amazing what we don't think about. And we go, oh man, my arm. That's because you've got that shovel with a short handle on it. Lengthen that handle, give yourself more force. And now it doesn't take as much energy to move the same dirt. Your arm is not going to bother you. You have to think about your tools. It's really important. Your hands. My hands are bigger than a lot of women, but they're not as big as men's. So I get stuck in this place where if I get a man's design, I'm like this. And if I get a women's design, it's almost like a child. I can't hold it. So a lot of times I'll add, and then I discovered they have ergonomic tools that you can change how the handles work and the angles of things, and they make a huge difference. Automatic jar openers. They have can openers and jar openers that you put a battery in. So here you go. You don't have to have electricity, just need rechargeable batteries. Some of them are USB. I'm a big proponent for things that are USB because you can plug them in without batteries and you can plug them into any kind of charger. You could be a crank charger and it'll charge them. But they'll open a can for you. It'll follow no matter what kind of can it is. You put it on there, you flip it, and it figures it out as it goes around and opens the can for you. There are jar openers. There's all kinds of things to make your life easier, but most people aren't aware. We just keep trying to get through it, grabbing things. I'm famous for things off the top of the shelf on my tiptoes when they have extensions to do stuff. I'll tell you, and you're all welcome to laugh, putting on my socks. I cannot get a sock on my one foot. And a friend of mine said, you do realize they have tools for that. And I said, no, I can't reach down. You don't understand. And she's looking at me like, no, you don't understand. So sure enough, we went to, believe it or not, we were thrift store hopping. And here in this box was this thing to put your socks on and take them off. You put the sock on this piece, you put your foot in it. And as you shove your foot forward, it puts the sock the rest of the way on. $5. And I've been doing what I do to put on a sock, you could put on America's Funniest Home Videos. And here was this $5 answer that I could have ordered from Amazon had I known it existed.
Oh my word. I love it. That's an awesome story.
It's unbelievable the things we do. Now, for cognitive injuries and disabilities, like you said, a head injury, there are memory aids, there's task boards, there's tablets and phone apps that you can put in. And I don't have cognitive issues, but I have so much going on in my life that if I don't have you in my phone, you may not exist. If I don't put dates with alarms and times in, I get into something, especially if it's on the computer or I'm out with the animals, and all of a sudden I look up and go, where did 3 hours go? Even without that, it's really good to have ways, timers and things to remind yourself of things. Another one for some people is soothing devices. So sensory calming devices, and especially with head injuries. So things like weighted blankets, noise canceling headphones, a sensory room where they can just go sit that has really soft stuff that's got foam around it where it's quiet. There are things you can carry along. You can essential oils or music that's really soothing to you. Pictures that are soothing, and they can put them on a tablet or a phone and just put them in their belt and take it with them. The other thing are color-coded systems. If somebody has cognitive problems, we're remembering stuff, what goes with what, how things work, and they did it yesterday and they can't do it today, you can use things like color-coded systems so that they go, oh yeah, that goes with that. That goes there. Oh, this is the feed for the chickens because it's green and the piece of paper by the chickens is green. And all those things are really helpful so that people don't get frustrated and they feel like they can function and do things just like everybody else. And it just takes a little thought. Speech impairment. So there's all kinds of text to speech technology. Some of that can be challenging. Picture communication boards, they even have digital ones or just the old fashioned carry chalkboard or the ones that you can use the different colored pens on for people. The other thing is pre-recorded voice commands, which is a great idea for things you have to do all the time. Even if it's with the animals, something you can carry where you can hit number 5, number 6, and talk to the dog or move the cow or answer somebody. Things that get said a lot. If you have problems with speech, that would be really helpful. And some emergency messages so that you could say, I need help. I need somebody to come, or I could use some assistance. It's not an emergency, but pre-recorded voice things for common task and situations. And the other one is a picture-based task list. So once again, I know where everything is here, but somebody else may not. So if I have pictures, even a child can do the chores. If I have pictures, a picture list, imagine this. So feeding the chickens, what does that look like? You're going to go out to the chicken coop. The food is here. You're going to take this many scoops and you're going to put it in here. Anybody can follow that. Anybody. You don't have to have somebody tell you how to do it. You can see it. So those are just some ideas for people that have speech impairments. The other one is chronic fatigue and energy. You have to have comfortable seating. We don't have to rough it through everything, because when you can really relax when you sit down and you don't hurt when you get up, that helps your energy level. That energizes you. And I have to talk about that one because chair heights are huge for me. If it's too low or it's too high, when I stand up, I can't walk. I look like I'm 180 years old. But if it's somewhere in that right height, I can sit on it for 2 hours and then get up and I'm fine. But I had to learn what that height was. So play with things, adjust things, and set alarms. Here we go again, to take breaks for that person that gets into what they're doing and totally lose track of time, which is me. I set alarms in my phone so that while I'm out there playing with the chickens and having fun with the ducks and stuff, that I go, oh, yeah, you got to go eat. You got to go eat. Because I'm famous for getting up in the morning, making tea and going, oh, I need to just make that phone call. Oh, I'm going to do devotions really quick. Oh, my daughter's calling. I got to answer that, see how things went. Oh, I'll eat oh, wait, I got to go do some chores. Oh, wait, the dog is barking. Somebody's coming up the driveway. Oh, wait. And it's 3 o'clock and I'm making breakfast. And that's just not healthy. It's not healthy. Not that it would kill me to fast for 3 or 4 days. I have fasted on a regular basis. So I make it a habit to set alarms for myself. If I haven't eaten and it's 9 o'clock, I say, okay, by 11. I set an alarm for 11. So just some of the things to think about, especially if you have energy limits, is you're not going to work more than an hour, or you're not going to work more than 20 minutes, and set a timer. So when that 20 minutes is done, you're going to go sit on your bench and take a break with your lemonade that you brought. And then you can get back up and set your timer for another 20 minutes. So now I'm just going to go into some of the things you can use to make a homestead easier if you have challenges. So raised beds right off the bat, wheelchair friendly. They're friendly for people like me who can't stand very long, somebody with a walker, anything like that, somebody who can't get on their knees and get up. And I don't care what people say, there's certain things you can't do with tools way down. You're going to have to bend over. And if that doesn't work for you, raised bed is the answer. And on the edge of your raised beds, you're going to make it wide enough that you can sit, and you're going to make it at a height that's good for you to be able to sit and lean. Long handled tools, they reduce the bending and reaching. Wheelbarrow and garden carts. They have a cart out there that's motorized. It's billed as something to be able to take on a trail so you don't have to carry anything, but it's great on a homestead. It's got a remote, or you can set it up where it follows you. It's a smart cart. So you could be in a wheelchair and put everything in this cart and go up the trail and never have to look at it again. It would follow you. All your stuff would follow you up the trail. So there are ways to do everything. Homesteading is not something that's only for the able-bodied 20-year-old, because I'm not that. I'm not even close. Irrigation systems. Drip irrigation can be an amazing thing. Now, it is not something you put in and never look at again, because just like anything else, things can fail. You want to make sure that things are getting watered, but it's a whole lot easier to walk out to the greenhouse or the garden and make sure dripping than to have to haul the water and water everything. So drip irrigation and collecting water, that's easy. That takes no energy. So water collection off your roofs of your chicken coops and everything. It's enough water to feed the chickens. You don't have to haul water. You just have a tank for them right off their roof, and you just open it and water them. So these are ways to make things easier for you. Animal care. So automatic waterers that have floats in them so it fills up so you don't have to be out there all the time. Ramps and steps. Like I said before, you could have a ramp or a step on a stanchion. And once you train animals to go up or go onto something, they're pretty good about it. So it's just probably the first 30 days, you're going to have to get them up there and put the baby in the front and those kind of things. But then they get used to it and they just go up there, and you can have your buckets and stuff in your motorized cart and wash the cow or sheep or goat off and milk them and put everything in your motorized cart and let them back out. And you don't have to haul the cart. You get back in your wheelchair off of that transition platform you made, and you get in your wheelchair and hit the button and keep going, and the cart's going to come right behind you with everything that you had. So this is all doable. Grooming tools that are so that your wrist, it's good for you. Great Pyrenees. I've had a lot of types of dogs, and this is the worst coat I've ever had in my life. I've never seen anything like it. And I feel bad for him, not me, because they keep saying, oh, combs. Yep, no. So I've got this bar that I use on him to really be able, it's the spring and the summer, and he's in transition right now. So those are the hard times. But you have to get things that work for you. I have rotary nail clippers so that I'm not doing this. I have a thing that looks like a Dremel tool with a little sandpaper barrel because both my dogs are huge and they have big nails. So this, and they get used to the noise. I had to train them, but that's so easy because I just sit there and do this. They put their paw on there and I get them all done. Electric fencing can, you can put it up with minimal effort. You can even carry it. It's so light. You could throw it in that motorized cart or a cart you have to pull, which is what I do. I have a cart I pull, and it's so lightweight, and you can put it up anywhere for your poultry and things, or you can put up electric fencing that's permanent, but it's something you can do by yourself. You're not lifting poles and that kind of thing. Maybe one pole to put it on or things like that. You might have to have somebody come and dig it in, but it's something you can maintain pretty easily. And it's just clips that you might have to replace, the solar panel if you have one. So that makes life easier. Cordless power tools are your friend, and adjustable workbenches. Cordless power tools are how I do everything. And I can't imagine trying to drag a cord and a generator and stuff. I do have some plug-in things for some bigger things, but not all the time. I tool belt, 3 tools, 1 battery. I'm good. I'm good. Mechanical things that help you lift and move things are worth their weight in gold. I'm finally strong enough that I can lift a 50-pound bag, but I couldn't for 3 years, 4 years. So think of things. Here you go. Think outside the box. Okay, you just got all this feed delivered and they put it where you asked. So at least you're not trying to move it. But now, oh man, you forgot to have them put the layer in the coop. You know what you can do? You can go take a small bucket and take feed out of it and go feed them a little bit. You don't have to lift that big bag. Let's say it's in your car and the person who was supposed to come to the truck or the car and help you unload it, they've got the flu. I will tell you how many times I've had feed in the back of my car for a month and I just kept emptying bags a little bit at the time, and the grit and everything. So there are ways to do that. Robotic vacuum cleaners, long handled mops, storage supplies where you can take things off the shelf. Pressure washers are your friend. They work really well with the least amount of physical work on your part. And food preservation. That's probably the last one I'll talk about. But the more food you make for yourself, the less you have to carry things, go get groceries, bring things in. But there is work involved in that. But one of the things that I think is invaluable, and I'm putting one in, is a faucet over the stove. If you can, or you water bath, it is worth paying a plumber, or if you can do it yourself, to put in a faucet, because I have some pretty big canners. And even my smaller pressure canners and cookers, it's pretty heavy to just move it on the stove. We're not talking about carrying it across the kitchen. We're just talking getting it off the flame. Those water faucets right there in that wall are going to save you. You're going to think, oh, I'm not a spoiled brat. You should be, because that will change your life to have that right there where you can take your pot and fill it as much as you need and put your jars in, and you don't have to do anything. When it's done, you're going to take your jars out. You can just bail the water out of there if you want to. But what do you do to fill it? You're going to bring 3 buckets of water over and it's got to be a certain temperature. No, just put a faucet in. Things like that
Luetta,
make a huge
I
difference.
have seen those faucets and I always wondered what kind of a person needs a faucet above their stove. I wasn't dissing it. I was just more thinking to fill a pan to boil noodles. Like I just couldn't ever really see but you said filling a pot for canning, and suddenly, did you see the light come on over my head? I was like, what? This is brilliant. man, you're so smart. I love it.
Even water bathing. I have
Totally.
when I've got jars in there and trying to carry enough water over. And then you know how it goes. You get water in it, you get it to the stove, you start putting the jars in, you have more water than you need. So you're bailing water out of there. What if you could put the jars in and then put the water in right on the stove? What a concept. So
Wow.
yeah, it's worth those kinds of things are worth your time and effort. They sound crazy, and there's things I couldn't imagine using. The other thing, if you haven't thought about when you're building stuff, whatever you do, you want a covered porch. Just take my word for it. I know it's more money. I know it's more work. You will be happy. You will be happy to have a covered porch and stairs because you can set stuff down. You're not in the snow. You can set stuff down. You're not in the rain. You can temporarily put something there. It's, let's say you bring a dresser home and oh my goodness, life happened and you didn't get everything moved out of that room upstairs where it's going. You can set it there and cover it, and it's going to be fine. But if you have a porch that has no cover on it, that's not the case. I got a porch built this fall and it has changed my life. I can't wait to cover it this summer. And it's great for the dog. It's great for me to be able to step out and not step right out into snow. So just think about these things. Think about the everyday things. And they're really, I wouldn't say they're common sense because we're so used to just getting in there and getting it done any way we can. And there's ways to work smarter, not harder.
I think there's so much wisdom to that, Louisa. That was so good. I just saw, I won't quote it properly, so I'm not even going to try, but I just saw a meme not very long ago that said there's two types of people. There's those who say, I can't, and those who say, how are we going to do this? And I thought, how often have I sat at a junction and been like, oh, I can't do that, and then just walked away rather than looking at it and saying, man, how am I going to figure this out? And it's a total mindset shift to instead of seeing something, saying I can't, and then turn your back to it and walk away, rather than sitting and looking at it and taking time and really figuring out how you're going to make it work. And I think part of what happens then is you might start to do it one way, and that's when the ingenuity starts to flow. And then you
Yes.
realize, so it might be a little bit hard, but then you come up with an even better and better way. And pretty soon you've got a great system that's very workable. And it may not work for everyone, but it works really well for you and your situation. But you have to take that first step and you have to get away from the I can't. But I also love your concept of thinking about these things before you jump in, because it's pretty overwhelming when you have 100 I can'ts in front of you because now it's November 1st, you got your first snow and you realize and it's freezing and you realize there's all these things that you hadn't thought of. So being systematic and thinking through what you need to think through so that when those bumps happen in the road, it's not everything that's falling apart. It's just a couple things, a couple challenges that you have to face. And then it makes it much more manageable.
And the other thing I would tell people is it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. Professional carpenters make mistakes. They just have been doing it for so long, they know how to fix it. I cook. I make mistakes every once in a while because I'm in a hurry or I'm not paying attention, but I've done it so long, I know how to fix it. That's how you learn. That's where the wisdom comes from, is from making those mistakes. That's how we learn. So it's okay. Don't not do something because, oh my goodness, how am I going to do that? I don't know. Just like Tandy said, a lot of times I've gone outside and gone, okay, I am doing this. I don't know how, but I'm going to do this. And I'll start in. And just like she said, the action of doing it as you're doing it, you go, oh, wait a minute. I've got that cart. Oh, wait a minute. I've got that jar. This would work. Can would work. Oh, I know. I'll get the dog to drag this down. It's amazing what comes to you once you go and just start it. So don't be afraid. Start drawing it on paper. One of the things I do is meet with people and we talk about things so that they can see. And I have a set of videos that'll be up next month in April on YouTube that are just beginning. It's just basic, how to look at a homestead, what to think about, what do you need, especially if you have physical challenges. And I have some classes that'll be starting in May, and they actually have a lot of resources. I have spent a lot of time researching, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are people that have some really great ways of doing things. And so I've looked it up for you, and there's a list of tools and people that make certain tools, but this is totally doable. Don't let it scare you. But yes, you have to start and grow a little bit at a time. And when you start, you get that totally down. And then you go, unlike what I did, which was what she's talking about, where you get there and you go, wait a minute, it's winter and you've got birds. And how are you going to butcher? And what are you going to do here? And how are you going to do this? I love to tell people how to do things in the order to do it in so that they can have fun and be successful.
Aw, I love that. Thank you so much, Luetta, for coming and talking with us. And I just can hardly wait to see you at the expo. And the more I get to hear some of these pre-talks for the expo, I'm like, how am I going to splice myself into four? Because there's so many things going on and I don't want to miss a
Yes.
thing. But this was really informative and it was inspiring. I think anyone who hears this talk is really going to be encouraged. So thank you for taking the time, and I'm excited for the expo and for what you're bringing to that. And we will put. Do you have a website yet? Or do you have a website?
Not yet. I have a newsletter that I put out, Homesteading Elders, and it's on Substack.
Okay.
And so I have subscribers on Substack to Homesteading Elders.
Okay, so we'll put the information to subscribe to that in the show notes so
Okay.
that folks can find that and they can subscribe. And then when your website's live and when the other things come up, then they can be informed of all that too.
Yes.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louita. You have a wonderful evening.
You too.